So I have in my hand a dual band setup, and this novel setup looks to combine a night vision device on one eye and a thermal device on the other for a really great and capable lightweight setup. So I would say 2024 was the year of the binoculars, so there was a lot of new bino housings that came out and more affordable combinations to get people's feet wet with night vision devices. However, I think 2025 is going to be the year of the thermal because of its amazing detection capabilities. So let's get into dual band setups, why this guy is probably going to be the best setup for most night vision users out there, and how I set this exact device up for my needs. Thermal devices for target detection are going to be unparalleled. You know that thermals are pretty much impossible to hide from, and they offer fantastic detection capabilities in seeing humans, living creatures, or heat signatures in any environment. In this case, it'll beat pretty much any night vision tube. We tried this outside by putting a person at the same distance with a thermal and night vision device, and even with a high-spec device, if someone's standing still, they can get lost into the noise and surroundings of the environment. Thermals, on the other hand, it doesn't matter where this person is hiding. Human beings emit quite a bit of heat because we're warm-blooded creatures, and thermals are going to be designed and great at seeing that. Of course, if you're using this for any other purposes like hunting, pest control, or anything like that, thermals are going to beat nods out every single time in terms of detecting heat signatures. For my search and rescue guys out there, thermals are also going to be better than nods for finding that person that's lost or needs help, or finding other signs of life, such as a fire or something like that. Another advantage of thermals is because you're not relying on the intensification of light, thermals can be used in the day. Because it's a digital device, inherently it's going to be a bit more durable than the analog tubes of a night vision device. This also increases the capability of the device that you have, because you can use it now where you can't normally use the night vision device. However, there are a few considerations for using thermals in the day. For example, if you're using it on a very sunny or hot day, or using it in an environment where there isn't too much thermal differentiation between the targets, then the thermal is not going to be very effective. So if you're using this guy in the desert where the sun's been beating on the sand all day and you can't find a dude, probably not going to be very good. On top of that, if you're using it even just past the sunset and it was a really sunny and warm day outside, you might get a lot of false positives from the rocks, trees, and things surrounding you. It's going to depend a bit on your environment and what kind of thermal device you're using. Another advantage to thermal devices is that they can actually see better in super pitch black environments than night vision devices. And there's a few reasons for this. Night vision devices need light to amplify. Even the best filmless L3 super gain tubes are going to need some light to be able to amplify. If you're in a pitch black room with no lights coming in or very little light coming in, you're probably going to see a noisy mess no matter how good your tubes and glass are. Thermals, on the other hand, just require some sort of thermal signature to be able to see something. So if you're in a pitch black room, let's say you're walking into like some pitch black factory and you need to find a dude in there, you might not be able to see anything with nods unless you turn the lights on. With thermals, if there is a person in there, you will be able to see that person. Now there is a caveat to this, especially indoors, because in indoors, everything is kind of room temperature. If there's no heat signature in there, you'll probably see a gray mess. You won't be able to see really anything at all. But in this case, if there's no heat signature in there and there's no lights on, your best choice of action is probably going to be just to turn on the lights. Now, thermals are actually going to be a lot more versatile in their use cases than nods are. Another thing you can do with thermals that you can kind of do with nods, although it's not as optimized for, is using them as a weapon-mounted device. Now, there are dedicated weapon scopes out there that are thermal scopes. Those are going to be really great for any long-range shooting. But in the case of using a dual band setup, what's really great is we're going to get over this a little bit more in detail later, but you can take this off over here because of this Picatinny and dovetail style mount, and you can just mount this on many accessories, including our flip to center mount over here, which mates really nicely to this rifle. And now you have a thermal capability on your rifle as well as magnified thermal optics. Now, this isn't going to be as good as using a dedicated thermal optic on your rifle. However, it does add a lot of use case scenarios to whatever setup you have. So definitely having a dual band setup just gives you that versatility that having binocular night vision doesn't really give you. Another benefit with thermal devices is they can be used as observational devices. So many thermal devices, including the Jerry YM and the P Falcon, will have built-in video recording and picture taking capabilities. So this can be used like a thermal camera for surveillance or anything like that, or if you just wanted to record your last hunt or your last Force on Force training session, thermals can do that without having to attach a bulky recorder like you have to do with the night vision device. No matter how good they are, they're going to have some sort of digital refresh rate. So previously, a lot of thermals used to be 10, 15, maybe 30 hertz if you got something really high end. And if you're a computer gamer, you'll know what I'm talking about. The higher the refresh rate, the smoother the image is going to be, and you're not going to get a jittery, laggy experience like you would as if you were playing a game on a really old computer. Shout out to all my guys trying to run Crysis back then on a Pentium 3. Now, even at those very high frame rates, it is a lot smoother than our legacy thermal devices running at 30 and below, but you still do get some lag. So if you're using these guys in a really rapid, like CQB environments, you're whipping your head, doing a lot of whip pans to your head a lot, thermals are going to have a little bit of a hard time catching up and detecting things. I find thermals work best when you're doing slow scans around, or you're doing kind of like segmented scans, like you're just kind of looking in little pies and slicing that pie with your eye. It's not super great for just whipping around and doing very, very quick scans. You're going to have a little bit of rolling shutter effect or that jello effect, and you're not going to be able to process what that imager is giving you. So the great thing with thermal imagers is that they can see through things that night vision otherwise wouldn't be able to see through. One example is going to be photonic barriers. So if you're wearing night vision, you already know what I'm talking about. If someone shines a light at you that's really bright, it's actually really hard to see, if not impossible to see, what's behind there because your night vision is just bloomed out by the light source. It's not too different from actually looking at a bright source of light with your eyes. You can't tell what's around you. It's very disorienting. With thermals, that doesn't pose a problem. So if there's a person behind a bright light source, you'll be able to see them no problem. Additionally, if you're working a lot with smoke or if you're working in foggy environments, thermals can see through fog and smoke with little issues. So that might provide you some interesting opportunities and operational considerations. However, that does come with a downside. Thermals actually can't see through some materials as well. One example of this is going to be glass. So if you have a car windshield, a window, or anything like that, you're just going to basically see a mirror smooth finish. If you do see a heat signature behind a piece of glass, chances are it's something reflecting off of that piece of glass, just like a mirror. And then this is where night vision comes in. So if you kind of notice this theme here, night vision actually has the opposite in terms of benefits and in terms of cons that a thermal has. For example, night vision has a much larger field of view. Typical night vision devices have 40 degrees or more, depending on the type of glass you choose, field of view, which is about twice or 3 times as much as a thermal device. Night vision tech has been around a long time, so it's very intuitive and very easy to use. Even the most feature-rich goggles out there, such as something like the Steel Industries Nighthawk, the Nocturne Industries Manticore, they have very, very simple UIs. It's going to be on-off, illuminator on-off, and maybe gain control, if that. With a thermal device, there's buttons, there's menus, there's a lot of things you have to get used to before knowing how to get the most out of it. You're going to have to turn the brightness down, you're going to have to increase the contrast, change the red levels, pick whatever color mode you want to use. With all these amazing options that give you a lot of capabilities, it just means there's a much higher learning curve to getting the most out of your thermals. I don't think that's a huge deal. Most of you guys are using iPads, phones, cameras, all that stuff with a million different menus anyways. So if you get used to that, I think if you put a little bit of time into your thermal device, it's not really going to be a huge consideration at all. Night vision devices have a much longer battery life than thermal devices. And this is not just a little longer, it's on orders of magnitude. So a night vision device can last anywhere between 40 and 60 hours. In the case of this Tanto, it's looking closer to 40 or 50 hours, whereas even something as good as the Jerry YM 2.0 over here, while it's much better than previous legacy thermal devices, it only lasts about 5 to 6 hours depending on the ambient temperature conditions. The P-Falcon lasts even shorter at around 3 to 4. So if you are using these two devices together, I do suggest carrying extra batteries, more into that a little bit later. And night vision devices can see where thermal cannot in some cases. So that example that I brought up earlier, glass, well, thermals might not be able to see through glass, but night vision devices can see through glass no problem. So if you're using this device for any vehicular work, you're definitely going to want to have a night vision device attached to one end, so that way you can actually drive and move around with it rather than just seeing a gray washed down mirror. So yeah, there are cons to both night vision and thermals. And what the dual band setup intends to do is it intends to basically bridge, no pun intended, those cons and pros together so that the advantages of the thermal kind of beat out the disadvantages of night vision, and the advantages of night vision complement the disadvantages of thermals. It literally is, in many ways, the best of both worlds. So let's break this down into its individual components so you can see the considerations that I put into each part and how you can set this up on your own. So we have all of these items broken down to their individual components. Let's go over each one and why I chose them. So let's start off with the most obvious thing, and the thing that most people are going to start with, and that's going to be the night vision device. In my case, I'm using a Nocturne Industries Tanto. I have some bikini covers on it as well as some defenders just for lens protection. And the reason I chose the Tanto is because it's one of the lightest monoculars out there on the market today. This overall setup is going to be a little bit heavier than most conventional binocular setups. So in my opinion, every bit of weight that you save will really end up paying dividends in the long run, especially if you plan on running this for hours and hours at a time. Most of the time, a thermal device, it comes as it is. There's no really changing it, so you're kind of stuck with the weight that it has out of the box. For something like a Nod, you have a lot of options in terms of housings, intensifiers, glass to configure this device for the performance and weight that you want. So I chose a Tanto because it's super light. I'm also running RPO NVDN lenses on these. So overall, this monocular weighs well under 300 grams. In addition to that, it also has a very simple on and off switch, so you don't need to really futz with the controls. I like keeping this as simple as possible because the thermals have a lot more going on with them. I believe inside of this guy, I'm running an Echo Plus tube. I think this one is around 2200 FOM or so. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's a very, very clear tube. That being said, most people are actually going to start out their setups with a monocular device. What's nice about running a bridge setup like this is that you're actually able to use a more modestly spec tube. In this case, I believe this is an NVT4 testing tube that we have for filming videos and stuff like that. This unit is going to cost a lot less than this guy. This is a PVS 14, so it's going to be a little bit heavier. It's also going to have manual gain if you get a manual gain compatible tube inside, which most of ours are. So you do gain some capabilities for that weight as well. On to that point, the thermal actually kind of adds more than just better tube performance to your device. Because you're seeing things in an entirely different spectrum, the thermal adds an overall level of performance and capability to the entire setup. So if you need to save money to get a little bit better of a thermal device, or you want to save money getting a nicer bridge and all those things, it's actually not too bad of an idea to kind of go with a more modestly performing tube and a more budget housing. That way, you can have a little bit more cash to spend on your thermal device and still maintain very similar detection capabilities. Yes, you're going to get a much clearer image with a more expensive tube, and I do recommend getting the best glass that you can for the money. However, in my opinion, if you really need to save money and you do want to build this setup out, you can actually save a lot of money just by going with a bit more of a modestly performing tube, because a lot of those performance differences are going to be supplemented by a thermal device. So let's get these night vision devices out of the way and then move on to other elements of the setup. The thermal device that I'm going to be using for my setup is going to be the Jerry YM 2.0. I have a few accessories on this. Obviously in the front, you can tell I have our Defender because I do use this for force on force reasons. The Jerry YM 2.0 already has a lot of reviews out there. It is a very, very solid performing thermal. It has great detection capabilities. It's small. It's very light for its size. This thing has a lot of image modes on it. It has built-in recording. It also has image offset mode, so you can move the image around to better match the image of your night vision device. It also is capable of being used as a standalone rifle sight or as a clip-on, which we're going to discuss a little bit more on later. On the bottom over here, we have our PDAP, or our Picatinny Dovetail Adapter Plate. And we have two versions of this, one to fit the Jerry and one to fit the P Falcon, which I have over here. It basically combines a dovetail, so you can mount it onto something like this bridge over here. And then it also comes with a Picatinny section, so you can mount it onto something like this, which is the UP FTS, also known as the Universal Picatinny Flip to Side Mount. This is a tension-based mount that you can mount in front of something like a red dot or a scope. With the red dot, we do recommend having a magnifier behind it, so that way it kind of compensates for the eye relief of the thermal optic. But what this allows you to do is you undo these latches over here, and then you can take your thermal optic, mount it on, and then do the latch up. And then now you have thermal capabilities for your rifle. And of course, you can flip this to the side when you just want to use a conventional red dot, let's say passive aiming with night vision. You can move this to the center for thermal aiming. We also have a more rigid mount for those of you guys doing more long range stuff, and this is more for quick detection and really, really quick work. So you can adjust the tension on this guy. It has a really hard stop to stop it, and it can also flip to the other side if you just flip this mount. So this adds a lot of versatility to your thermal setup, allowing you to not only use this as a head-mounted device, but as a rifle-mounted device as well. So these two devices fill very similar roles, and a question we often get is which one do I pick out of the two? First one is going to be price. The P-Falcon is going to cost a bit more than the Jerry YM 2.0. The P-Falcon is also going to have a little bit less battery life than this guy. This guy, I believe, has a battery life of around 3 to 4 hours, and this one is looking at 5 to 6. The P-Falcon is also going to be made of metal. It's a lot more rugged, and that also reflects in its recoil rating. The Jerry YM is only rated up to 5.56, so if you're using a 5.56 rifle or a 9mm carbine, this thing will be totally fine. If you're going to shoot anything heavier than that, like a 308, you're probably going to want to get the P-Falcon, as this is rated for a much higher recoil than this guy over here. In terms of detection capabilities, the P-Falcon is very minusculely better than the Jerry YM. It also has a slightly wider FOV, but honestly, it's not too big of a difference. Unless you're holding them side by side, you likely won't be able to tell the difference in detection range. The P-Falcon also can be equipped with a defender, very much the same as our Jerry YM, and it's made of the same materials, so you can rest assured your front lens is going to be safe from damage. One note about the P-Falcon is its dimensions. If you look at the Jerry YM, it's a bit taller and a lot more symmetrical than the P-Falcon. Now, this might not mean anything if you're just mounting on your gun, but if you're mounting it on something like an M1, you have to remember that this battery cap space might get in the way of certain monocular units, and sometimes you can't get the IPD close enough for certain faces. So all in all, which one do you pick? If you're primarily going to be using this as a head-mounted device and you don't really worry too much about rifle capabilities and you're not shooting above 5.56, then it's a no-brainer. Go with the Jerry YM. If you need something built for heavier calibers, something that's a bit more rugged, and you are shooting above 5.56, let's say you're hunting with this, shooting 308 or larger calibers, then you obviously need to go with the P-Falcon. So now let's look at probably the most important piece of the puzzle, which is going to be the M1 panel bridge. The panel bridge is a great concept and a great product made by our friends in the States at Noise Fighters. And this thing is an ultra light aluminum bridge that comes out of box as a dual monocular bridge. It will come with two arms that look like this, and will also come with these guys, which are Tanto adapters. If you guys are using the RVM 14, which is another really great product to use with this guy because it is lighter than a 14, you're going to need a separate adapter. We'll include a link for that in the description below. I've attached a little lanyard to my panel bridge over here, so that way I have some retention. So if I'm doing any running and stuff like that, something gets bumped, I don't have to worry about that falling off. And you're also going to need a dovetail adapter. This guy is going to make it compatible with our PDAP, which clicks in like so, and then allows you to use the thermal without any compromise on your eye, and it also articulates no problem very smoothly with these nylon washers on the M1. Now the M1 also pans, as its namesake suggests. This doesn't really do anything for thermals, but it works really well with night vision devices, so I never really thought of it as a negative feature. If you do want to lock it out, all you're going to need to do is tighten these set screws over here to lock that so it doesn't move at all. However, it hasn't moved on me accidentally in my use. I actually recommend getting the panel bridge anyways, so that way you can save money and not have to buy this additionally after you have a standard J-arm. As an example, I have a Raj here, and of course, because we designed this, I do love this J-arm, but the panel bridge does essentially the same thing as the Raj for a bit more, but it also opens up that ecosystem, so you don't have to buy it twice. If you're to buy the Raj with this setup, you'd have to buy this separately, which does waste a little bit more money. If you do want to use this as a monocular bridge, it's super easy. You just pick what eye you want it on. Let's say I want to run this on my right eye, as I normally do. I would just take this other arm off and then just run it like this. It still articulates, it's still really stiff, it still works really well, and it's still super lightweight. So if you plan on building up this setup either into a dual monocular setup or into a thermal setup later down the line, I would say get this off the bat with the night vision device of your choosing. So let's put this all back together. All right, so here's the device fully assembled, and then I'm mounting this guy on my helmet as normal. Currently, I'm testing out the nice Nocturne Industries Alpha mount, which definitely we'll have a future video on later. And it works totally fine. It articulates totally fine, as you can see here. It works very similar to any other night vision system. So let's bring out the scale and see how much this guy weighs. As you can see, it weighs 1 pound, 6¼ ounces for you Americans out there, or it weighs 134 grams. Now, like I said, not the lightest setup in the world. You have to take into account I'm also running some accessories on this, like lens protectors, the Defender, and all that stuff. But this is actually very comparable to many bino setups. So if I'm running, let's say, a 1431, which is a heavy bino, this guy is going to weigh just a little under that at 608 grams, and that doesn't include any accessories. If I were to put a Cody on this guy, it would probably weigh closer to 700 or so grams. So yes, this is still not the lightest setup in the world, but it's not super, super heavy. I've run this for quite a long time, and I didn't feel that much strain or anything like that compared to my other more lightweight setups. So how is this setup compared to something like a bino, and I don't have one on hand right now, with a Cody on it, which is another way of doing thermal fusion, where you get the benefits of night vision and the benefits of thermal. The benefits with using a Cody is the fact that it's very quick detection. It's a much cleaner overall image. You don't need to kind of merge the two images together or play around with eye dominance. The nice thing about a Cody is you put the Cody on the nod, you turn it on, you kind of adjust it to make sure the image is aligned, the brightness and the modes are what you like, and then you go. The disadvantage of the Cody is that it's very small, and therefore it does not have as big of a sensor or as an objective lens as something like a dedicated thermal. So the thermal capability of a Cody is pretty neutered compared to a proper thermal device. While you can use the Cody in a day with the adapter, it is quite a workaround. It's not really that great. It does work and it works okay, but it's still not as good as using a dedicated thermal binocular in the day. Going the Cody route is also going to be a bit more expensive, especially if you're considering binos. You have to buy binos, which are going to cost about as much as this setup over here with a starter kit device, or you're going to have to buy a mono with a Cody, which is around the same price. But again, thermal performance is compromised for that ease of use and that quicker detection that a Cody can provide. Because Codys are mounted and they project an image to your nod, if someone shines a really bright light at your nod and Cody, you actually lose the thermal signal because that light overpowers the projected image of the Cody itself. Whereas with a dedicated thermal, because it doesn't see in the light spectrum, that doesn't matter. You can shine a 2000 lumen light into this thermal device and you can still see the person behind it, no problem. Although their hands might get a little bit worn from holding that crazy lightsaber in their hand for a bit. So is the dual band setup going to be the setup for you? The dual band setup is going to be an excellent way to get the most capability on top of your head for the size, weight, and cost. Yes, there are other setups out there that can accomplish a little bit more, such as using a bino with a Cody or a true fusion device. And in those cases, yes, those devices can cover some of the similar things that this device can, but A, you don't get a full power thermal with it, so you can't use those devices in the day very well, or you can't mount the thermal onto something like a weapon or use it just as a handheld device. But B, those setups are also going to cost a lot more. And then for a true fusion setup, like an ENVJ-B or a Jerry FB, well, those are just simply going to cost a lot more out of the gate. I do think for most people, having a setup like this truly represents the most capability that you can fit on your head. I think we're going to see a lot more of these devices set up like this in the future. So that being said, thanks for watching, everybody. I know this was another long one, but we love to go in depth. We're super excited to see thermals take more traction in the year 2025. And yeah, that's about it. Dual band setups. Really, really cool. And honestly, a great setup for most people. We'll see you on the next one, everybody.